So, welcome to Thrive, your agency resource. When we think about following up with agency prospects during the sales process, we immediately, for some reason, default to those emails that start with the subject line, just checking in, right? Joining me today is Lee McKnight Jr., who is the VP of Sales for RSW List, which most of you probably know already. And together, we're going to help you start to reframe that follow-up mindset into one that will help elicit response and actually help you close more ideal new business. Lee, thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, Kelly, thanks so much for having me. This is great. I'm looking forward to it.
So a while ago, the reason why this whole episode came out or was put together was a while ago, you had shared some really great content on LinkedIn. I know that that was something that you had been doing for a while, but there was one particular video where you kind of did a little bit of a teardown of some follow-up emails that you had received. And I actually thought it was pretty brilliant because you not only showed the emails, obviously respectfully crossing off the names of the people who
Yes,
sent them.
gotta be nice.
But you really talked about why the way that they approached you in those follow-ups was problematic. So just for some context for the audience, I'd love you to kind of give a little bit of an overview as to like what were some of those things that you were encountering and why were they problematic?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. And so where this, as you said, where it came from. So we have our company's RSW US. So it's RSW, and then we do have a separate list building group where we sell those. And I bring that up only to say what we're doing is working solely with agencies to help them drive more new business. So this series that we do is just, it takes a piece of agency new business. We try to do that in 4 or 5 minutes and just talk about ways to help agencies drive more of it. And in this particular video, as you said, I get these emails, and we all do, right? And I have a good email folder and a bad email folder, and I will keep all of them because I learn from all of them, right? And with this particular video, as you said, we were trying to be respectful and certainly not trash anyone specifically or at all, just to say, look, these are things that you
Don't do it.
shouldn't be doing, right? And so, and as you know, I'll tick those off just as you said to kind of lay some context. But the first one of those 3 takeaways was never make your prospect do the work. There's way too many emails where you are asking, or in some cases, I just got one yesterday, making a prospect try to do something where you have no authority to do so yet and no relationship whatsoever. Because that top of the funnel, especially, you can't do it that way. So making a prospect do the work is essentially like you send an email saying, hey, I'm following up. There's no email underneath. You're not referencing anything about your company, which happens all the time. So essentially, like, well, I'm sure you've researched me, and you're making all these assumptions to where, no, make it as easy as possible and be as direct as possible with your prospects. Don't make them do that type of any work at all, right? So that was number one. The second one was just, and you just said it, and gosh, it happens all the time. It's stop checking in, and it almost becomes, I think, for some salespeople, second nature, to where they don't even know they're doing it. And
I think it's actually a task list, like a task on their CRM, like check in with so-and-so. And it's
no,
literally
you're
like
exactly right.
an email that's like checking in.
Totally. No, oh my gosh, you're so right. Yeah, exactly. And they just don't even think about it. And so that's an easy fix to make where you're wasting valuable real estate. The person doesn't, the prospect at that point doesn't really care, just to be blunt. So that's a pretty simple fix. And the last one was, and this doesn't come up as often, but it still does. And that's, don't ask for my thoughts as a prospect, because I'll get some emails where they tick off a box of, to your points in the CRM. Well, this is my 4th touch. I don't know. Here's all I'll do. I'll respond with my email underneath and just say, this will be nice and short. They like that. Any thoughts on what I sent or something along those lines? And it's like, talk about making a prospect do the work. It's, no, I don't have any thoughts. I don't even know who you are. It's like, don't ever waste your time doing that. And culminating all in that email I got yesterday, which was crazy. I'll give you one more example of this individual. This one was really fun. Didn't put the email that he sent me that, hey, following up on this. I have no idea what he's following up on. Never said what his company did. Then immediately proceeded to say, well, so I've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday open. I can make myself available at any time. However, the morning really is preferable. I'm not even making that up. I was like, wait a minute. You're telling me that I'm going to do this, but make sure it's the morning, even though I'm available all the time. It's going to be better for me if it's the morning. I'm
Right,
like, oh
right,
my God, what are you doing? So
right, right.
things like that. Yeah. So that was where the context, that was that
So
video episode.
no, and that's great. That's great context. And so this is what we're dealing with, right? And
Yeah,
like if you're listening or watching this, like you get these, you know exactly what's happening, right? Like you know that this is the case. This is most people. It could even be your vendors, your partners. It could
good
even
point.
be your own business development reps or your own salespeople that are doing
Right.
this, right? We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
But since this is clearly not the way to go, this is not the approach to take. This all about me. I need the information. You can schedule some time with me on my my availability. Like that is not the way to go when you're trying to
Oh,
establish, rapport and trying to develop new business, right? So
yeah.
how can people that are in these positions really build trust, add value? Like, what are some examples
Yeah.
that you feel like would be appropriate ways to follow up?
Yeah. And I think, yeah, so I love that question. And I think taking a step back too, when you think about, you and I talked previously, um, why does it even happen? And to frame it out, some of it might be inexperience. And that's where
For
agency
sure.
leaders certainly need to be willing to, and you'll hire a new business director internally a lot of times, and they're just an island on their own. And some of those are inexperienced, and that, and you're like, well, they were cheap, right? And not to belittle, not to make less of that person, but a lot of times that happens. And what they don't do then is train those people
Right.
as individuals,
Right.
and which you get what you get, if you're not going to help
Well,
them.
yeah, it doesn't, you don't set them up for success. They're not going
Yeah,
to be
you don't
successful.
exactly, better way to put it. But more often than not, it is, and we talk about this, you could say lazy, and that's certainly maybe some of it, but it is just not willing to put forth a little bit of extra effort. But the good news there is a lot of your competition, thinking about agency leaders, whether they're doing it internally, partners are doing it, for example, with a small to mid-sized agency, which is where our clients typically, a
Mhm.
good portion of them are that, or they have one person trying to drive it all. Ultimately, uh, it is not, it can be hard. Sales is hard, but just to put forth a little bit of extra effort. But when you do that, you already set yourself apart from the competition just by trying
Yep.
to do a little bit of homework, which
Yep.
you should be doing.
Right.
And you've already taken a step towards adding value. So that's the first, when you ask me that question, that's the first thing that you can do to automatically, probably from 80 to 90% of your competition, which is huge.
Right.
But then specific things that can be helpful. So one is I was thinking about us talking about this today. First one of those, let's just think about email, because that's where so many folks today, that's how they're trying to drive
Sure.
sales. And I will say, we think that's a mistake in terms of how we operate for our clients is don't just, and not to get off topic, but just sticking with one platform is not giving you all the different options that you could have.
Yeah, totally agree.
Right. So I think, but because email still is so prevalent. So one of the things, don't always sell in your emails. And for some salespeople, this can be tough, to think, well, I'm a salesperson. What would I, because I can't tell you how many emails I get on a daily basis. Kelly, I'm sure you do as well, right? Where I almost never get anything that is value-based or thought leadership driven by content that they created, or that, and sometimes you don't have that content, to be fair, but Google's your friend, say that all the time, right? It's again, maybe not easy at that exact moment, but typically you're going to be able to find something that's non-competitive, right? That someone's written that speaks to a trend or speaks to, something going on within the industry, to show that prospect that, look, we understand your big picture challenges. We are experts in this space, for example. Here's a POV and something we thought that you would find of interest. And there's no call to action other than that.
Right.
And sometimes you can put one in there, indirectly, but to just do that, and it does need to, ideally, if you can gently tie it into work you've done for a client or a past client, to say, and by the way, we've done similar things for X company. Would love to talk about it sometime. You could do that kind of an indirect sell, but just to do that, you're going to stand out, right? And you're going to start providing that value and start to be memorable, which you have to be to set yourself apart. And that's, in doing that in the right way, not in that example I gave with that email from yesterday. I actually remember that company name now. That's not a great thing, right? Now I'm not going to hold that company to task for one email from one salesperson,
Right.
but you don't want to be remembered in that way, right? So you have email, and I had two other examples. One of those is just thinking about old school mail, because it is still effective. And granted, during COVID and through all this, we're not out of it yet, right? But we had to take a pause in terms of what we're doing for our clients. But even then, we found creative ways. And it was interesting how people were more willing, if they were kind of warm or hot, we had some interaction with them. We would throw out to them, we have something we'd love to send you in the mail. It's something a little bit different. Or it can even be just a letter. But more often than not, when we respectfully asked that question, they were willing to give us, if they were still in the office, which some were, but even home addresses. And we would say, that's great. We will totally respect your privacy. You will never get anything else from us, but thank you. And just, again, making yourself memorable. And what you are sending obviously has to have some kind of value as well, but you can, whatever you're including, or even if it's just, hey, I'm going to follow up with an email to send more to you digitally, just another way to stand out and build some value. And the last comes from, and I will give props. It's an agency out of New Jersey called the DSM agency. Creative director there sent me specific examples of using a platform like Vidyard. And
Is that Dan?
That's Dan. You know Dan?
I know Dan. I know Dan
Yeah,
Sam.
sweet.
I know Darren. Darren's gonna get a kick out of that. We shouting him
Yeah.
out on the show.
Oh, how did we not know that? Yeah. Love Dan and Darren. And they are smart. Their whole group is smart, right? And
Big
and they're not a
fans.
client actually, but we've done some video together too. But yeah, so Dan, and I believe 2 or 3 of these at least led to closed business.
Mm-hmm.
He got on that platform and just did, I want to say it was 3 minutes. Said, hey, great talking with you. I mentioned, I know we didn't have time in the first meeting, or I'm paraphrasing here, but yeah, this is just, I told you I'd give you a brief example, and I can't remember exactly what they demoed at this point, but it just played so well and personalized it, saying that individual's, of course, their first name, and, ending it with, those are just the kind of things, if we do work together, you can expect from us. I'll be following up, have a great day.
Yeah.
But, and you have to be comfortable with video. So I think, that's something that people might practice, but yeah, it was great. And I thought, I haven't personally tried that yet, but I'm going to. So I think there's just 3 examples of ways to add value that are not insurmountable. They're not hard, but it takes a little more effort. That's just good sales, right? So,
For
yeah,
sure. For sure.
yeah,
I mean, those are great examples. I will build on that because those kind of sparked some other ideas for me too.
cool. Yeah, please.
So like what you said, if you're not comfortable with video and you want to use something like Vidyard or one of the other things out there, you don't
Yeah,
necessarily have to be on camera, right? Like you can be demoing something and be doing like a screencast,
great point.
right? So it could just be audio. That also led me to another idea of I don't think enough people use the voice memo functionality in LinkedIn Messenger. So if I get a
Yeah, talk about
little,
that.
yeah, a little note from someone that says, "Hey, this was a great call." Like obviously we're already first connections because they're able to message me.
Right.
So a great call yesterday. Whatever they're following up. It's a 1 minute, 2 minute, just as if they were leaving me a voicemail on my
Yeah,
cell phone, right? There's something different about it, right? So what you're trying to do is stand apart and personalize and add value and develop rapport. So you can use any one of these kind of things. The thing that sparked an idea, the way that you mentioned mailing something physically,
yeah,
I have taken to every once in a while, if I'm having a call with a prospect and we talk about something where it's very clear to me that there's a particular book that they should really read,
yeah.
I will actually ask them like, hey, there's this particular book by this author. I'd love to send you a copy, right? I get their physical address.
Yeah.
Just ask them for it. They're like, wow, that'd be great. That's really generous, or I'd be grateful for that. They send me their address. I pop into my Amazon account. I send it off with a little note, like as a gift, and it's great. Do you
I
do that
love
with
that.
everyone? No, because that's like 15,
Sure.
$20, right?
Right.
But your cost per acquisition on an account that is, double digits of thousands of dollars, like, yeah, you can afford a $15 to $20 book, right?
Yeah.
It just shows that you're willing to go the extra mile, that you actually care about them as a human, right? And then the last thing that I do pretty often is if I'm in the car or I'm walking, I'm listening to a podcast or I'm
Mm,
digesting some piece of content that triggers a memory of a conversation that I recently had with a prospect or even an existing client. Talk about building relationship, right? And I will share that link to that podcast or that piece of content and say, hey, I wanted to send this to you because about halfway through the show, this person says this, and it really reminded me of that conversation you and I had and your viewpoint on XYZ. Take a listen. Let me know what you think. Right. So that's the
That's
one
awesome.
area where, let me know your thoughts is actually totally applicable. Right.
Absolutely. Because you've given that context and
Right.
the personalization that
Right.
is, I mean, they're going to be wowed by that for sure. I mean,
Right, right.
yeah,
So these are all, I mean, we had just had 5, 6, 7 different examples between the two of us that none of them were the checking in email. So, if you have that in your arsenal, if you write those things down, or maybe we'll even put that in the show notes, all of these different
sure.
examples,
Yeah.
that's a great arsenal to work from, right? If you're having trouble thinking about how am I going to make sure that I develop this relationship, add value to this prospect, and try to move it, through the sales funnel.
Yeah, and I love, well, the mailing, you made my example so much more concrete. I love that, the book, and then the LinkedIn. Oh my gosh, that, because I've only ever gotten one of those from a salesperson. Not only did I listen, I actually did call them back. It ended up maybe not
Oh
being the
my
right fit.
God. You
Yeah, you
call
know
them
what?
back.
Because you're so, and I totally hadn't thought about that. And you're so right. So that's just
Yeah.
another tool that you're right. I think salespeople, and I wonder how maybe they don't even know they can do it.
Yeah.
So I like, that's a great point too. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's face it, agency life looks very different than ever before. Remote and hybrid teams need better tools to help them communicate and access files, track their time, manage client budgets, and more. If you believe that it's time to streamline things once and for all, Workamajig is the all-in-one agency management platform built to help you do just that. Head over to workamajig.com/thrive to learn more. Back to the show. So, I guess the big question that would probably be on the minds of some people that are in the business development realm for agencies, even probably a lot of agency leaders or owners who are doing biz dev themselves.
Yeah.
The question might be, is it actually worth our time to build this kind of trust at the top of the funnel? I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your thoughts about that.
That is interesting. And because I think at the top of the funnel like that, when you say trust, it almost sounds like too strong a word, right? It's like, well, I haven't even, there's no relationship yet. So you can't, almost cart before the horse in a way. And so I love that when we had talked previously, just thinking about, talking today, I love the notion of it because there are still ways to build that trust, even at that early stage. And we've already, all this has been kind of about that, but I think
Mhm.
specifically, I think one of the things that I always like to point out is when you are prospecting, what you have a great opportunity to do, number one, is to start building that trust by showing that prospect, here's what it's going to be like if you do work with us.
Mhm.
Because like that email I mentioned, not to keep bringing that up, and that poor fellow, but
I mean,
seriously,
he's one of the reasons why we're talking today. So
he
like,
is.
please
And
bring him
think
up.
about it, like, would you want to work with that person?
No.
No. And by definition, or then take it a step further, maybe not that company, even though that's not entirely fair.
Right.
However, it starts out that way, and that's no
Mhm.
way to start. So I think just by showing them, and again, all these examples that we just gave, you kind of are starting to build trust, even at the top of the funnel. And I think, again, thinking about that, you want to make sure that not only talking about what it'd be like if we work together, but giving them a reason
Mhm.
to trust that I'm not wasting your time with any of these touches.
Right.
And it's not going to happen in the very first one. And the old sales axiom of it takes about 6 to 8 touches on average is
Right.
probably about right.
Right.
Depending a lot of factors that go into that, right? But I think you're going to make an impression over time that sticks. I had we just had a new client that I brought on in the agency, and I've been here. This is my 14th year. I've been talking to them for 7 years.
Wow.
Thankfully, it doesn't always take that
That's a
long.
long sales process,
It's
Lee.
it's not always that long, right? Sometimes it's like 3 weeks, but it's one of those things where, and I'm not going to hurt myself patting myself on the back here, but I am proud to say that when it does take 2 and 3 years, which happens too, I will typically get a comment that, I always appreciate the fact that you stuck with us. You were persistent, but persistent with value in the
Right.
sense of, you never just tried to pile things on. You did provide us over time with, hey, we have this new report we just finished, or this new
Mhm.
episode. I remember our conversation. I thought actually a lot of these things that you brought up, kind of similar to your podcast example, Kelly,
Yep.
and those are the type of things that I certainly take pride in as a salesperson, that at the end of the day, our company was put in good stead. They did see what it would be like to work with us.
Yeah.
Now, again, thank God it doesn't always take that long. But with those type of examples, I did eventually build up trust. But it's you use that word build, you do it kind of block by block. And
Right.
so I think a lot of salespeople will get frustrated or think that this isn't really going to work because I didn't get a return. I didn't, after that second touch, I still got nothing. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, that's only the second touch. So I think having, and the ideal is you always have your own content, but we know that's not always true. So
Right.
but our examples that we gave are ways that even without that content, you can still, start to build that trust.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And so what we're really talking about here is like reframing this, what I'm affectionately calling the follow-up mindset,
Yeah.
which really synonymously is like a scarcity mindset. It's like I have this some kind of feeling inside that I'm worried, right? Like the reason why you would follow up is you're worried that this prospect is not going to close,
Hmm,
right? And they can
sure.
feel that on the other end. They
Oh, yeah.
know when you're, you know, barraging them with these check-in emails, like
Yes.
all that does is repel them, right? So
Yeah.
now we're starting to get into like a conversation about being self-aware and being of a giving mindset, an abundance mindset, as opposed to this scarcity or follow-up mindset. And just like I know this is a little um, off kilter for some people in terms of how I'm describing that, but like just
Yeah.
stay with me. So if you're kind of going more into that giving mindset, right? That abundance mindset. What we're really talking about there is then conscious leadership,
Yeah.
right? I'm always going to bring it back to that.
No, I love
My
it. Yeah.
audience knows that.
Yeah.
So can you share from that perspective, can you share a little bit about your own experiences? I mean, you're a professional sales guy, right?
Yeah.
Like you're great at what you do, and it's because you have that giving mindset.
Well,
Because you're adding value, you're building trust. Like that is an active thing that you do, which is why you close business, right?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so like what have your experiences been at, I mean, I know RSW, the leadership is very much in line with your own personal values. So if you could talk a little bit to that, maybe in juxtaposition with other situations where it maybe hasn't been that way.
Sure. Sure. No, and I love that you tied it in, to the conscious leadership, because I think it definitely applies here as well. And you already kind of laid that table, but I was thinking as we were coming into today about an example of exactly that. The context being, when agencies, small to mid-sized agencies, again, and we just touched on this earlier, are trying to drive new business. Often it's the partners, but again, a lot of times it is the one, or if they're, I was gonna say lucky enough, if they are of a size where they can have maybe a team or a small team to drive new business. Leadership sets the tone there, and so thinking about my previous experiences, and as I mentioned, I've been here quite a few years, but right before coming into this position, I won't name the company, but it was it was the opposite of what we are here in terms of, this was a very boiler room. I don't think it's a stretch to almost say unethical sales practices, nothing like illegal. It's way too,
Right,
nothing along
right,
those lines,
right.
but truly unethical and just throwing you to the wolves, going after each other's prospects, Wild West. And you could say it might make you tougher. Okay, maybe. And it might, but it was interesting because I was the old man at this place. I was 31. So it was young, first, so many first jobs, coming into there. And it was a terrible precedent to set, for all of us. But thinking about conscious leadership, and I love the way you put that in terms of that giving mentality. There was none of that, and
Right.
so and the turnover there was atrocious. I mean, it was crazy. And with these folks that would leave, a lot of them bitter, and this is their sales takeaway, but this is all they know at that point.
Right.
When they go to that next position, and this was not an agency, by the way, that I worked at. They're starting with a horrible foundation it is not a solid foundation. So I
Right.
think, thankfully, I had been in a previous position for about 6 years from that boiler room job where I had from leadership, I had a really good foundation. I would totally say there was that excuse me, in terms of the new business direction and
Hmm.
how they train folks. And I think that's a huge piece that agencies have got to make sure. You can't just, and especially if it's someone who is not necessarily younger, but inexperienced, could be younger. You've got to set that table for them. And because that's part of your culture too. And that it's all intertwined. So I think
Yeah.
that's critically important. I'm glad you brought it up because it really is.
Yeah, I would say also like I don't know that it matters so much the age of the person or even
Agreed.
yes, of course, experience level matters in a lot of contexts, but I would say like if you're an agency leader and you have a business development rep or someone who's helping you as the business development lead, and they're not closing, they're
Yeah.
not being able to open up conversations, whatever tasks or roles or things that you have them doing, they're not being successful.
Yeah.
That to me would be the indication that they need some more support. So like as we start to wrap up, what would be some ways that you might advise agency leaders or owners to help
Yeah.
their sales and business development reps if they are unsure about how they're replying to prospects and
Yeah.
potentially using some of these things that we talked about at the top of the show? How would you suggest broaching that conversation and kind of righting that ship?
Well, I love that. That could be a whole nother episode, right? But
I mean,
I won't
sure.
do that to you. But no, it really could. No, it's such an important question. And, I think, first of all, as you're thinking about hiring that individual, so that's the plan. Then one of the things is you've got to look inward to leadership, to yourselves,
Hmm.
and really think about how you're going to set the table and what those expectations are. So often it might sound odd, but it is a little too loosey goosey for lack of a better. I can't believe I said that, but it really is though, and it's what you want is to not have that person, that new business individual, kind of be on an island, which often happens. And
Most of the time it happens that way.
right,
Yeah.
and expectations are completely out of whack. They're not set up front.
Right.
So I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, we hired this person and it went nowhere. Well, let's unpack that for a second. What do you mean it went nowhere? Well, it just, we were like 3 or 4 months in and we barely got anywhere. And I'm like, okay, first of all, 3 to 4 months is nothing. If you just hired that person, you're talking about day one, you're expecting them. And if you're hiring an experienced person, okay, yes, you can expect more that out of the gate, they're going to be able to deliver. But so I think part of it is just setting expectations. But number two, again, to my earlier point and yours, it's having that open conversation. That's part of conscious leadership as well. I would say is having that, because at the end of the day, some people just aren't, it's just not going to be the right fit for various reasons. And even if you give them that support, I think you also have to have in your head certain milestones and a yardstick, and you share them with that individual. You say, here, as you're hiring them, you should be sharing that, right? Because if you're not on the same page, you've wasted your time. The average new business director in an agency lasts about 18 months. There are various reasons for that. And sometimes it's legitimately they weren't the right fit. But more often than not, it's all these things that we've just been talking about don't happen. You don't have the open line of communication. You're not giving them support. And you didn't, in some cases, train them properly. I had another agency that I was talking to in the last 6 weeks said that person had quite a bit of experience. And I'm not going to knock this agency, but I pointed out to them that they said, but they never really got us. I don't really know that they could really sell us. I thought, what is that? I said, because it may be that if it's a complex sell, fair enough. Maybe that person just ultimately, but there were steps in place that never should have been the case.
Right.
Whether it's positioning or just like, it was weird. So
yeah, that indicates to me that is a very unconscious leader who would project that and say like, oh, well, they just didn't understand who we were, as opposed to
I think
like,
so.
where in the process did I actually not set them up for success and not train them properly and not ask
Yeah.
what questions that they have, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
two completely different ends of the spectrum. So
It is.
yeah.
So yeah, that's what I throw out. And again, it's not always, not to put it all on agency leadership and that you didn't do it right. I mean, again, sometimes that person just is not the right fit and they're not.
Sure.
Fair enough. That's sales.
Sure.
But yeah, to your earlier point, I mean, having all those things in place up front is critical.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really fun conversation. I knew
Yeah,
it
it's been
would
awesome.
be. Lee, thanks so much for joining me, and we'll chat soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This episode has been brought to you by Workamajig, the #1 creative agency management software. Show notes at thrive.workamajig.com. Find out how your creative agency can become more productive and more profitable. Schedule your demo at thrive.workamajig.com.